Hello and welcome to Oilers Live Podcast. I've got as my guest today Matthew Esteves. He is the host of the Raw Charge podcast out of Tampa Bay. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you're on Tampa Bay Lightning are on a trip right now through Western Canada, and they're doing all right.
Yeah, well, they've had some hair-raising moments here and there, but for the most part, they're doing all right at the moment.
So I got you on the show today because I wanted to talk about the Tampa Bay Lightning and what we can expect for the game tomorrow in Edmonton. I watched the game against Calgary. As anybody who listens to my podcast knows, I've got two favorite teams: the Oilers and whoever is playing the Calgary Flames. And so of course the other night Tampa Bay was my favorite team, my second favorite team, and so they came out a little flat, obviously down 4-2, but came back. Is that? I haven't watched enough games. Is that kind of their MO this year? Are they, the kind of team that's been battling back, or is that just a one-off? Either way, they did us a favor. But what happened that game?
So to answer the first question you asked, is that how they've played throughout the entire season? No, it's been kind of a tale of two halves so far. The first half of the season, Tampa Bay was pretty much just running roughshod over everybody. They were just dominating people. Once December came around, though, teams started adjusting to what Tampa Bay was doing, both in the power play and at even strength, and they started victimizing some of the solar players on the defensive end, and it started causing problems. We still had a solid December, but entering the new year, there was, at least with me, there was a little worry about, the team isn't playing as great as they were at the start of the season, but this is one of those ebb and flow things that all teams kind of go through. But then once the new year came in, it got really rocky. Started off good with beating Toronto, and then the team started having a whole lot of issues defensively. Regression came all over the place for a whole bunch of the shooters. The power play started becoming stagnant. The penalty kill started becoming a sieve. And just recently, the team has finally kind of to start stabilizing themselves. And the Calgary game was kind of a microcosm of that, in a sense. They came out, they looked okay, and then Calgary got two goals that were kind of just like, all right. And then Tampa came back a little bit, and then they allowed two goals that were just made you go, okay, this is bad. Like specifically the one that Stamkos just let Sean Monahan just skate down the left wing and just score. And I was like, oh Lord, that was bad. And then they absolutely exploded in the third period, which reminded us all of how dominating this team can be when everything's clicking. But as of right now, I feel as though the team is kind of just figuring out how to be consistent again. It's, like I said, it's the ebb and flow of the season where teams will be hot, teams will be cold, and teams will be just, trying to iron things out. And I think right now the Lightning are just trying to iron a lot of their issues out, which primarily is on the defensive end and ensuring that their forward lines are actually consistent every night.
Yeah, so obviously over the course of the year, right? They've only amassed 13 losses, so they're doing all right. That's reasonably consistent and puts them in the top of the league, of course. I look at this team and I see what we want the Oilers to be, which is a team that progresses year after year. When I look at last year, they just missed the playoffs. In fact, and they made a great run down the stretch. I think they were 8 wins in their last 10. What has changed for them this year over last year that's allowed them to progress the way they have? And the reason I ask, because you brought up something that was relevant to the Oilers, which is other teams adjusting. And this year, most Oilers fans would agree that the Oilers have not adjusted to how teams have started to play them. Whereas it sounds like that the Tampa Bay Lightning are doing exactly that. They're adjusting game by game, and they're they might go through their valleys, but they're certainly overall seem pretty consistent. So what's changed from last year that has allowed them to progress?
First and foremost, health. A healthy Steven Stamkos does wonders.
Yeah,
you should be able to fully understand that when your top center is healthy. You have Connor McDavid, and when Connor McDavid is on the ice, I'm petrified. But health is the biggest thing that has helped the Lightning. Stamkos went out after 20-something games last season. We had a whole bunch of lingering injuries that hampered us throughout the season, especially the beginning part of the season. And the inconsistency in goaltending. Ben Bishop had a really, really strange time last season with us. And Vasilevsky had his hills and valleys last year as well. Once Bishop was traded, though, it seemed as though a switch went off in Vasilevsky's head, and he just became this shutdown goaltender who has been phenomenal this season for us. He's easily been our MVP. Aside from those two factors, the rise of Braden Point and Yanni Gourde cannot be understated. Before Point showed up last season, our second center was Tyler Johnson, which in all essence you'd think that's a pretty good center.
Yeah.
Well, Point came in and took his job pretty much, like literally just took his job. It's mine now. And Braden Point anchors the second line, where he usually has Andre Palat, who's currently injured, Tyler Johnson, and Yanni Gourde. And his line has been the de facto shutdown line for Tampa Bay that also scores at a really, really consistent rate. I mean, Braden Point was an all-star, for Christ's sake, which that allows the Stamkos line to do whatever the heck the Stamkos line wants to do, which is just score at will. So in addition to that, surprisingly, the addition of Jan Girardi on the back end has helped stabilize the defense. Last year, the defense was an absolute disaster. I can't explain any better than that. It was a disaster last season for us. And this year, I was one of the people at Raw Charge. Actually, I think all of us at Raw Charge were pretty against signing him because we were just like, he's effectively one of the worst defensemen in the league. And he comes in. He hasn't been terrible. He hasn't been he hasn't been by any stretch of the imagination spectacular.
Yeah,
but he's just been good. He's just been solid. He's given us a very solid presence in the middle part of our defensive pairings. That's really helped stabilize everything else and really helped Mikhail Sergachev, gradually get more minutes and become more comfortable in his role. But those are the biggest things that has changed from last season to this season is health, young players stepping up, and, Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov pretty much just scoring at will.
Now, what do you think? Because I had AJ Hafley from BSN Denver on just before the Colorado game, and we were talking about their team in Colorado and how they've actually gotten younger this year. And yet, they've had a significant increase in production from everybody on that team. Now, I have a look at Tampa Bay, and part of what I'm trying to get at is what makes a good team, right? What makes a Stanley Cup winning team? Obviously, nobody's quite figured that out year after year, or we'd have some pretty big dynasties. But now I look at Tampa Bay, and you've got Chris Kunitz there, who's closing in on the 40-year-old mark, and Dan Girardi and Callahan and Coburn, and these are guys in their starting in their 30s. So it's a little bit of an older team compared to, say, Colorado, but you've got a good base of young players. How much of a difference do you think guys like Kunitz make?
So when it comes to the age thing, I think Tampa's around 27 point something. I think we're in the top 10 or just outside the top 10 for one of the youngest teams in the league, just because of how many young guys we do have. But the veterans we do have, the old guys we do have, are guys who have pedigree to them. Chris Kunitz has, oh gosh, I can't even remember how many cups he has. Four? He has 4 cups. 1 with Anaheim, 3 with Pittsburgh. And Kunitz just brings that veteran leadership that the front office thought that we were kind of lacking at times. Callahan brings veteran leadership, and as does Girardi, but Kunitz brings something different. Kunitz has won. Callahan and Girardi haven't won, nor has Coburn, but Kunitz brings that mentality of, hey, this is what you need to do to win hockey games. And given the fact that he's also a versatile player, I mean, he's been getting some top-line minutes, especially recently, with Stamkos and Kucherov, that it's helped him produce a little more than normal. And it just helps show the younger players on the team that, hey, this guy's like 35, 36 years old, and he's still plugging away, doing the little things, doing everything he can to help us win. And that rubs off on players. There's no doubt about that. That will rub off on the younger players like Gourde, Point, Sergachev, all those little things. And then, the stuff behind the scenes that we don't know. For all we know, Girardi could be that guy he's a glue guy, keeps everyone together, keeps everyone focused behind the scenes and stuff like that. And you need guys like that. You can't have an entire team of that, because I think it kind of defeats the purpose. And then you basically have a whole bunch of Chiefs and no Indians. And so, sprinkling in some older guys who have been there, they've done that, they've won, they know what it takes, they know the grind. that just helps the younger kids just understand, hey, this is what it takes to win. If I want to win, this is what it takes. It's one thing when Steven Stamkos tells you that, and Steven Stamkos hasn't won anything technically besides the Eastern Conference Final and a Rocket Richard. But when Chris Kunitz tells you something, and Chris Kunitz walks around with 4 rings on his fingers, that has some clout to it.
And do you think, obviously he's UFA after this year, what do you think? You think he's back for another year after?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do not know. It honestly depends on what Kunitz wants to do. If we do somehow run the table and win the whole thing, I think Kunitz could possibly retire. But, I mean, who knows? We didn't really expect to sign him in the offseason. When we heard about the signing, we were just like, oh, Kunitz. Okay, cool. I have no issue with Chris Kunitz. He's just one of those guys. We're like, hey, I'd love to have him.
There were a number of, upper 30s, early 40s veterans out there, right? And, they were going for all different types of money. But $2 million for Chris Kunitz and to see him play top line minutes, that's a pretty good deal.
That's a bargain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with how effective he's been. I mean, at the start of the season and for majority of the season, he's played on the fourth line with Callahan and Paquette and whoever else we put on the fourth line when Paquette's injured. But I'm just given the fact that Kunitz can literally just, when needed, he can go on that top line and supplement Kucherov and Stamkos and help bring a little more scoring depth further down to a lineup. That just speaks to how versatile and how good of a player he still is at his age.
Yeah. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Matthew Pekka has been in for a number of games and has shown some real life. What's your thought on him so far? And I think he'll be in for the game tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Pekka, so I've talked to our Syracuse affiliate people a few times about Pekka. They've always felt as though Pekka's playstyle doesn't really fit down in Syracuse, just because the AHL is a much more bigger and a rougher league, and that's not Pekka's game. Pekka's much more about speed, which is what the NHL is about. And they've always said Pekka, once Pekka gets some consistent time up there, he'll impress. He impressed in a small little game sample last season, where he got his first NHL goal. And since he's been up, he's looked great at third line center. Me personally, I'd like to see a little more, see if he can consistently keep it up, because I think hockey fans in general kind of get a little too, I don't want to say homerish, but a little too excited when young kids come up and they play really well. And then once they, hit their little lulls, people tend to turn on them. So I'm more of a guy who's like, I like what I see. Let's see if he can be consistent. And when he hits his lulls, is he still going to be doing the little things? Is he still going to be back checking? Is he still going to be fighting in the corners? All those types of things. But right now, I'm loving what I'm seeing, because besides getting defensive help at the trade deadline, a third line center or a veteran winger is the two big things that the Lightning could be looking at the trade deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, right? That third line that you've got going right now, Gourde, Pekka, and Killorn, with the exception of Killorn, of course, those two are really small guys, right? So, yep. It's I look up and down the Lightning roster and I see a pretty complete team right now, and that's the way they're playing. I guess you're right. I mean, injuries obviously play a big part in it, and they were 1 point, 2 points out last year from making the playoffs. Do you think this team, though, given the size, is a Stanley Cup contender this year?
Yeah, I do. I think they're a Stanley Cup contender. There was a piece that came out from The Athletic by Satchel Price, I think a month ago, maybe roughly. He was talking about the shift that some teams are having when it comes to their forwards, and how they're not really too afraid of going after smaller forwards. If you look at our forwards really aren't that big comparatively to other teams in the league. But yet you look at our defense, and our defenders are huge comparatively. But a lot of our forwards are under 5'11", under 6 foot, not giant guys. And in some hockey circles, people would be like, well, how are you going to deal with the grind of the playoffs? And I just simply countered, well, we made the final in 15 with basically the same structure, big defensemen and relatively smaller forwards. And it worked out quite well for us. If it wasn't for injuries to Kucherov, Johnson, and Bishop, I think we probably could have taken that series. But it is what it is. We can't really change history. Injuries happen, and the Lightning just didn't adapt well enough in the 15 final. But at this point now, I would definitely say Tampa's probably the leading contender for the Cup. just because of how well they've played so far. I mean, they've had their lulls, but they're still a top team in the league, even with the lull.
Yeah, I would say they're definitely a favorite right now. I wouldn't deny that. I was thinking earlier this year. I mean, what we saw with the Oilers last year was a faster team. And this year they're maybe not as fast as we thought they were after some of the changes that have happened. They've slowed down a little bit. They're a much bigger team this year than they've been in the past. I think they lead the league in hits right now. This used to be the makeup for a Stanley Cup winning team. If you just think back to LA when they would win the cup, or even the fact that Anaheim got as far as they did last year. And then you look at the size of those teams and you think, well, maybe you need to put together a big team. And I came to the conclusion earlier this season that I think, at least to make the playoffs now, you need a small, and you need maybe not a small team, but you need a fast team. And that size, on the blue line, exactly how you said, is paramount. But having those small, speedy wingers is great. And you're right. I mean, I look up and down the lineup for Tampa, and Killorn is the biggest guy you've got. Right. And for the most part, everybody's under 6 feet tall and under 200 pounds. So that's not a big team at all. And I go back, I play a lot of hockey, and I'm a 6'5", 220 pound guy. I play D. And I find those small, quick players really hard to play against. So this is, this is not surprising. This is the way it needs to be. And Stevie Y's done a good job so far.
You probably wouldn't like me on the ice that much then. Because I'm 5'8", 150-ish pounds. So
all right, yeah. Who
just flies all over the place.
The biggest hit I've ever taken was from a guy about your size. So I have a lot of respect for the small guys.
We have a little chip on our shoulders just because, we have chips on our shoulders only because the big guys like you like to grind us in. So whenever we get near a body, we tend to go, no, you're not pushing me around.
and to take that's the way these small guys are playing now, right? You got, of course, in Edmonton, you're going to find Drake Caggiula, who hasn't had the year we've expected from him, but he's probably one of our biggest hitters on the team, and he's not a very big guy. We're all excited about a prospect that's coming up through the WHL right now, Kyler Yamamoto, who's on an 11-game point scoring streak and 27 points. I mean, he's just a small guy, right? He might be smaller than Pekka. And, of course, you just left Calgary with Johnny Gaudreau, who's probably the most noticeable small player in the league, and certainly one of the most talented. So that's definitely the way the league is going. And I'm not going to say I'm disappointed. I love the small, quick game, and certainly exciting from a fan standpoint. Watching the Lightning has been, I've probably seen maybe a half dozen games, but every game I've watched, I am super impressed with this team. We, to bring this back to, how it's relevant to Oilers fans, I mean, we right now are going through something that, we've gone now, this will be the 12th season. If we don't make the playoffs, it'll be, we've made the playoffs one out of the past 12 seasons. And so, of course, at that point in time, everybody, wants a change in the front office with Chiarelli, and at the coaching side with McClellan. Obviously, Tampa's, stayed on with Stevie Y. What do you think? What's he doing right? And if you could look at the Oilers, how would you put that? Compare that.
What Stevie Y has done is he's prioritized hockey IQ and skill and skating ability over everything else. He's not really worried about size. He's not really worried about grit too much. He's more worried about your hockey IQ, your skating ability, your skill, and your character. I think the two biggest notable exceptions to that when it comes to character would be Anthony D'Angelo, who's currently in the Rangers organization, and Jonathan Drouin. If anyone tries to buck the trend with the Lightning, they tend to get shipped out of town. Druin, under different circumstances, I would say, than D'Angelo. But those are the big things that Yzerman looks at when it comes to scouting and getting players and player acquisition in general. When it comes to the Oilers, when they came to Tampa last season, I was at that game, and they terrified me. Like, absolutely terrified me with their speed and the way they played the game. I mean, they looked like they looked like the Lightning this year, basically. They were just all over you. McDavid was a nightmare to match up against. And he still is a nightmare to match up against.
Oh, yeah.
But I completely understand Edmonton fans' disposition towards the front office and the coaching staff. I think McClellan's a perfectly good coach. I just don't think he's been given the right pieces to really run an effective system at the moment. It's a speed league, just like you and I have been saying. It's speed. In some cases, you have to sacrifice size. And that kind of has to happen. I still think teams can have size. Look at LA. LA was still a good team with size. They weren't super fast, but LA played in a system that worked to their strengths, and they were able to mitigate their weaknesses. With it, I haven't seen a ton of Edmonton games, but from what I've read and from what I've seen on some of the games I've watched, they just don't look fast enough throughout the entire team. I mean, McDavid's the fastest player in the league right now, world in all essence. And you guys have some players who can keep up as well, but it's just the rest of the team just can't keep up at times, and I think it really, really hurts them. And then I don't know what the problem is on defense with you guys. Sometimes it looks like people are just not executing correctly, or maybe it could just be the system just isn't effective. But it just looks like the coaching staff and the players just aren't on the same page. And when they're not on the same page, players just tend to do what comes natural to them. And in the NHL, you can get demolished with that, because teams are so locked in on how to capitalize on mistakes that it can just snowball into a mess.
Yeah, it's and that's exactly what's happened for Edmonton this year. You talk about systems and getting the right players. I mean, that's kind of the debate right now, right? Is it one or the other in terms of McClellan or Chiarelli, or is it both? And that's if you're talking front office. I mean, obviously there's needs to be some accountability on the player side to do what's expected of them, perform how they should perform, and we've certainly seen McDavid is never a disappointment to watch. You'll watch the game tomorrow and be amazed, as every Oilers fan is, game after game. We're certainly lucky to have him. Did you get a chance, speaking of which, did you get a chance to get to the All-Star game?
No, I did not. They did not credential us for that event. I did do some of the festivities outside of it, but I didn't actually go to the All-Star game myself. I watched it, and I sat there amazed that Braden Point was even remotely close to Connor McDavid's speed.
Yeah, you know what? That surprised me too. That's great, though, right? From a future standpoint, he's not even 22 yet, is he? He's
no, I believe he turns 21 in March, I think. I'll have to check his birthday.
Yeah.
It's this year he turns 21, though, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe it is 22. I'll have to look.
Yeah.
I'll have to look.
Either way, I mean, that just to be where he's at this stage of his career, I don't think that was really expected of him. I mean, he's been 3 years in the system. Now he's playing second line minutes, and to be at the All-Star game. I don't think anybody, maybe outside of Tampa Bay, would have expected that, but he's doing
yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
None of us expected him to be picked as the replacement, and he'll turn 22 in March. But he's literally been probably one of the biggest reasons why Tampa Bay's in their position, just because of his play on that second line and creating a matchup nightmare for teams. I'm trying to think of a way to say this, but not enough praise can be thrown on Braden Point to accurately describe how important he is to this team, basically. That's the easiest way for me to say it.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I mean, the All-Star game is one of those instances where, love or hate the game, you get a chance to see what, players bring to the table. And he did that. And he proved, he deserves to be there. And I think people will start noticing him, when he comes through town, right? Everybody's going to say, watch Braden Point. He's one of the top players, and he certainly has been outside of, it's hard to be. And the other thing is, it's hard to shine on a team that has Stamkos and Kucherov. right? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you?
It most definitely is.
Yeah. How do you shine in that? But you've got you seem to have a number of players that are doing just that. What can the Oilers expect in terms of who would be the shutdown line against McDavid if they get out there tomorrow night?
Braden Point. Braden Point's consistently got up against the top lines every single game. You name a top line, Braden Point has been the guy who's gone out there and shut it down. Occasionally, John Cooper will put the Stamkos line out there against other top lines, but more times than not, it has been the Braden Point line that has been out there shutting down the Crosbys, shutting down the Giroux, shutting down the Matthews, all that stuff. It's been Braden Point's line who has been the de facto, we're going to shut you down and score on you at the same time.
And who's going to come out? Who's your top line power play? I mean, you guys are sitting top 5 in the power play again this year, and of course, everybody knows the penalty killing woes of the Edmonton Oilers. This is exactly the kind of matchup that scares me, especially when we're playing at home and we're sitting in and around. I have no idea what the stat is, but it feels about 50% right now. I heard something crazy, like in the last 11 games, the other teams have scored 20 power play goals against us, and we've scored 2 power play goals for our side.
That's rough.
Yeah. So I mean, this scares me. But I imagine you've got Stamkos and Kucherov, who rounds out the first power play unit.
So the Lightning have experimented with their power play over the last month and change. At the start of the season, and for the majority of the season so far, the power play units have been split in this. The first unit has been Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, Alex Killorn, Vladislav Nemestikov, and Victor Hedman. The second unit was pointed by Mikhail Sergachev, Tyler Johnson, Braden Point, Yanni Gourde, and we kind of rotated another player in there. It's usually been Conacher, or we've rotated some other players in there. But that's usually how... and Palat. Well, Palat's been healthy. It's usually how I've been doing it. Now, once the power play started hitting a rut and the penalty kills started hitting a rut, Cooper and the Lightning started to finagle some stuff. They moved Killorn off of the top power play unit and moved him down to the second one and moved Johnson up, and that started to get it going again. And then once injuries started hitting, they started moving. So once Hedman got injured against Calgary and Tampa, that's when they really threw it into a jumbler where Sergachev was pointing the top line power play with Palat up there and Johnson, and then Killorn, Strawman, and some others were on the second unit. Now it's kind of stabilized. Hedman's back on the top power play unit, given he's healthy again. And they're still kind of rotating Johnson and Killorn into the top power play unit. But more than likely, they will stick to what's worked, which is the Stamkos, Kucherov, Johnson, Nemestikov, Hedman top unit, with Sergachev anchoring the second unit with the rest of our forward core, because we can literally just cycle in so many good forwards out there.
Yeah, I mean, the other scary thing I look at this is, everybody. You could put anybody in there on this lineup.
Sorry to cut you off with that, but also another big thing that's helped the Lightning's power play is that both units tend to play distinctly different styles. The top unit with Kucherov and Stamkos tend to have Kucherov and Stamkos on the wings. You have Kucherov on the right, Stamkos on the left, Hedman on the point, Johnson or Killorn usually in the high slot, kind of hovering, and then Nemestikov right in front of the goal mouth, ready to pick up any of the trash rebounds that happen. And that unit is predicated on getting high quality shots, not necessarily shot volume, more shot quality, in the sense of you're setting up Stamkos' one time, or you're setting up Hedman's point shot, or you're trying to get Nemestikov down low on making the goalie move too quickly. The second unit is much more about grinding it out, getting in the corners, forcing the defenders to get out of position by moving them and forcing them to be in bad spots. That's what the second unit tends to do, because the second unit tends to be about Sergachev throwing the puck on net and then everyone else crashing, just causing mayhem. Yeah. And that's what really causes the Lightning power play to be so deadly, is because you have two units who do two distinctly different things, but if they have to, they can do what the other one does. It's just they both have their specified niches that they're good at, and teams have a hard time matching up to that, because most times teams tend to do the same thing on both power play units, and Tampa tends to do different things, and that kind of makes teams go, so what do we do?
Yeah, and I have no doubt. Although I'm going to hold out hope, but I have no doubt the Oilers are going to be asking that question all night. I mean, this is the team that the confidence obviously is a big part of that, but we just can't seem to get it done on the PK this year. At least the last run of 20 games, and it's just when you think it's going to get better or it couldn't get any worse, it seems to get worse. And watching and having Tampa Bay come to town, what I want to see out of this Oilers team is for them to finish off strong. And, this was, I go back to the beginning of the season when everybody pretty much had them as a Stanley Cup contender. And
me included.
Yeah. And I talked to, I had the guy I said from AJ from BSN Denver. He said the same thing. He had them in his fantasy pool. And so this is the problem why I have a big problem blaming Chiarelli for the personnel that's on the ice, which is, this is everybody, all the experts, everybody agreed this was a Stanley Cup contending team. Me and anybody I know, and with the, maybe 1% of the league saying they weren't, and they're not performing that way. It boils down to confidence, and this is maybe a bad or maybe a good time. I mean, you have one of the top power plays coming into the building. If we can, be successful against them, which is going to be difficult for any team that plays Tampa Bay. Maybe they can gain some confidence and finish out the year strong. I'm not one of the hopeful fans thinking we're going to make the playoffs this year, but I certainly don't want us tanking the rest of the season. I'd like to see us finish off strong, and you just go into the off season and make the changes you need to make, and don't rely on the draft. Talking about the draft, though, when I look at the team that's assembled right now, comparatively to some of the other teams I've looked at this year, Tampa Bay has drafted a good deal of these players. So they're players that have come through the Tampa Bay system. I mean, what's the secret? Who's the head scout, and what do you think they're doing that other teams aren't doing?
Al Murray is our head scout, and he's phenomenal at identifying talent and the right players to grow up in our system. And it just circles back to what I said earlier, what Yzerman wants out of his organization and his players. He wants high hockey IQ, high skating ability, high skill, and high character. Those are the biggest things that somebody who joins the Tampa Bay Lightning is going to be drilled into them. Those are the biggest things, and you can see that in all of our players. But it all boils down to development, and that doesn't start at the NHL level. That starts at the AHL level. That starts at the scouts talking with the players and making sure they're all on the same page. And Syracuse right now has like 10 rookies in their lineup, and Syracuse has been, they started off rough, but ever since we made the goaltender change, bringing Domingue in and giving Ingram more time, Syracuse has been a very, very good hockey team in the AHL, and it's the rookies who are carrying the way. We got a whole bunch of rookies down there. We got Volkov down there. We just so many players down there who are just doing what they got to do. And it also helps that Benwell Gruel, the head coach of Syracuse, runs roughly the same system that John Cooper does. So that way, when a player comes up to the Tampa Bay Lightning, he's playing the same exact style he played down in Syracuse. Yeah. So there's no learning gap between the players in Syracuse and Tampa Bay. They come up, I know what I got to do. And that brings a whole lot of, like you said, confidence to the player where they don't have to think. When you know what you have to do instinctively, that makes a player's job much, much easier, because then you're just reacting. You're not thinking, because when you got to think, you got to take that extra second or two to do something. I mean, you and I both play hockey. We both know how that is. If you have to think about something before you do it, you tend to get burned. But if you just do something instinctively, it saves your butt more times than not. But Al Murray is the head scout, and he is the one who's pretty much pioneered Yzerman's vision of how to draft players and everything like that. And I tweeted out a while ago, I think it was last month, about who was, like, out of all of our forwards, how many are homegrown. And damn near every single one was homegrown. Like, the ones who aren't are the older ones. Now, it's a different story on the defensive side, which the defensive side of our drafting is a whole other issue that all of us at Raw Charge have kind of had an issue with. But when it comes to drafting forwards and developing forwards, Tampa Bay has been one of the best in the league for the last few years.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at it. I mean, Stamkos drafted and developed. Hedman drafted and developed. Kucherov drafted and developed. Johnson, undrafted, picked up, developed. Andre Palat, drafted and developed. Braden Point, drafted and developed. Matthew Pekka, Cedric Paquette. you just go down the entire forward core of who we drafted and who we developed. And the ones who weren't drafted by us or picked up by us by undrafted free agents, they're veterans.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one of the things just amazed me. I mean, looking at the roster last night prior to you coming on, I looked and I couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously much has been made of the Oilers in their first round, their first overall draft picks, but you would think, given that pedigree and that history in the Oilers organization, we'd certainly have more in our system that were, developed and drafted by the Oilers. But, I don't think, and I have to tally up the numbers, but I don't think we're close. And it's quite neat to see, and then the other thing is you got guys, it's not all first rounders either, right? I mean,
No.
Matthew Pekka was a 7th round draft pick. And that's
he was a 7th. He was a 6th or 7th. Palat was a 7th. Paquette was a 4th. Kaloran was a 3rd. Nemestikov was a 1st. Kucherov was a 2nd. Stamkos was a 1st. Johnson wasn't even drafted. Point was a 3rd round draft pick. Braden Point was a 3rd round draft pick. Can't believe that. Cannot believe that. Yanni Gourde, another undrafted player, literally came from the bottom of the barrel. ECHL, had to work his way from the E to the A to the N. It just how they find talent that deep in the draft consistently, and like talent that's going to help the team consistently, is bewildering. That was another thing I said in my tweet. I was like, it's bewildering that they've been able to find all these impact players beyond the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to a theme, right? And they definitely they've got an idea of what they're looking for, and without sitting right there in their boardroom when they're talking about who to draft and who to pass on. I mean, it's you can only guess, but you're probably right. I mean, they've got those 3 sort of tenets that they're looking for, and they know exactly. Obviously, some good judges of character, and Stevie Y is and always will be one of my favorite players in the league, and from a hockey IQ standpoint, I mean, he was exceptional. Just lucky to have him. What do you think? Stevie Y's next move is, because we're closing in on the trade deadline.
Defensive depth and a top 4 righty. That's the biggest thing. Top 4 right-handed defensemen. We've been linked with Jack Johnson. We've been linked with Ryan McDonough. There's the constant speculation about Erik Karlsson, which I would love to have Erik Karlsson, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's feasible. But Ryan McDonough kind of makes sense. Aside from that, depth scoring on the 3rd line, 4th line, get another veteran presence there to help out the bottom line score a little more.
Yeah,
but the biggest thing is most definitely a top 4 right-handed defenseman, and there's a lot of speculation going on right now that we could possibly be looking at Ryan McDonough, which, okay, I really don't have an issue with Ryan McDonough whatsoever. He's a good defenseman, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
if he's given less than top pairing minutes, he could be extremely effective in a certain role, which you can then push Mikhail Sergachev into a less demanding role to help his development curve and to also bolster us for a cup run. Will he actually get McDonough? I'm not sure. But top 4 right-handed defenseman is the biggest need we need right now, and it's been a need we've required for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's definite shortage in the league, right, of top right-handed guys.
Yeah.
What chips do you have to deal? Like, who do you think would be on the out?
Well, when it comes to shipping stuff out, it depends what the team will be looking at. If they want an immediate impact player, Tyler Johnson's name has been tagged on some certain things. He just signed a brand new contract, so I'm unsure if Eisner would be willing to deal that. There's also Vladislav Nemestikov. He is going to be an RFA after this season, so he could possibly get shipped off, but again, I would go against that. That's if they want an impact player right then and there. Those are the 2 big ones that come up. I don't think anyone will take Alex Kaloran, given how much trouble he's having goal scoring. Albeit Kaloran's on pace to have a record year in points, but not so much in goals. We were hoping Color finally hit the 20-goal plateau. He's been close twice with 17 and 19 goals. This year, he has like 6, but he has a ton of assists, an absolute ton of assists. And he's going to probably break his career record for points. So Color could also be a trade chip. His contract might not be likable. I think it's 2 years too long, but that's just me. Other than that, we have plenty of prospects. Taylor Radish, we have Brett Howden, we have Cal Foote, we have the kids in Syracuse. Like, we have the prospects that a team could want, especially up and forward. We have 4 prospects we can kind of shed and see what we could do. It's just a matter of what teams are looking for. If the Rangers want to tear everything down, they'd probably want to go for a more prospect-laden approach. So Radish would be the first name on the list, followed by Howden, followed by possibly Volkov or anything like that. When it comes to if they want immediate help, Tyler Johnson, Alex Kolor, and Vladislav Domestikov, possibly Yanni Gourde, depending, because he's on a 2-year contract for $1 million apiece. So it's not hard to take that at all. But it's always hard to gauge these, just because teams could want different things. Teams could want immediate help just to supplement what they have, or teams could just want complete prospect packages and picks. But Yzerman has the tools to pretty much do both. It's just a matter of what does that team want, whether it be the Rangers, Columbus, or whatever other team could possibly be shopping a defenseman at this moment.
Now, your thought, is there anything wrong with the status quo? Going into playoffs with the team you have today?
The team, I think, right now could win a cup. They need some breaks, but again, the biggest weakness is the defense. And it's not to say our defense is terrible. Our defense is good. It's just it can be victimized by very fast teams, and when teams start pulling a cycle game on the Lightning, the team tends to get a little crazy in the defensive zone. It gets kind of ugly, and it's very painful to watch. But the status quo would not be the worst case by any stretch of the imagination. This team is still good enough. Still good enough to win a cup with the roster the way it's constructed. But this is the NHL. Crazy things happen, and what's the best way to try to avoid that? Stacking your team as best you can, and I think that's what Yzerman's going to do. Yeah. It should also be noted that Yzerman tends to not do a lot at the trade deadline. His busiest trade deadline was last year when he was selling pieces off. Before that, he didn't do much, and he usually did his work a little before the deadline. So if that's any indicator, Yzerman might get something done within the next 2 weeks rather than right up on the deadline, unless people really want to try to draw out the negotiation cycles and stuff like that. But Yzerman's never really been a big trade deadline guy. Like I said, last season was the first time he actually did a whole lot of things. Other than that, his biggest acquisition was Braden Coburn. That was a few years ago. So, if he feels as though there's a deal to be made, he'll make one. But I don't think he's afraid to sit there and be like, "Well, I'm not paying this much. I'll just sit with my first place team and roll the dice."
So I can't imagine. What's the overall consensus? I can't imagine people are upset at all with Stevie Y. Is there? What's the overall consensus of the job he's doing out there?
People love him. We adore him. We do criticize some of the failings that have happened under Yzerman's watch, which is primarily just the drafting and development of quality defensemen. But outside of that, there's not much to really complain about at all about Steve Yzerman's reign over the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's been wonderful since day one. It's had its bumps and bruises here and there, like every GM does, but more times than not, Yzerman has done the right thing for the organization. And the fan base and all of us at Raw Charge have full confidence in what he does moving forward.
That's awesome. So I want to maybe move ahead and let's chat about a couple of things that I want to make sure I ask every guest I have that's from a different NHL city. First thing is when you go, and this is something I'm interested in, where do you go for any of your, game information? Talking to AJ from BSN Denver, he said Stat Trick rather was a good resource for him. I use rosterresource.com as one of my favorite resources. What are some of the resources you use in your day to day that help you out as you're watching the league? When
it comes to overall stats, traditional stats, I should say, and accomplishments for players, I use Hockey Reference. Hockey Reference is a great site for that when it comes to tracking both player milestones and organization milestones. When it comes to advanced metrics, I bounce between Corsica and Natural Stat Trick. Both of them are extremely great sites. I also, for visualizations, I use HockeyViz. I'm subscribed to HockeyViz. Where that can give you it's just a visualization of like shot metrics and stuff like that. It's just a much easier way to digest the information and help you kind of gauge what you're seeing on the ice to what you're seeing on a graph per se. Because you could see like Corsi 4% at like 52%, but most people will be like, well, what does that mean? And if you show them a graph that shows like shot share, and it shows you like, red is for offense, red is good, blue is bad. And they can see, so that's what that means. So the more red you have here, the better. Stuff like that. I use all of those sites for my stuff when it comes to me writing recaps or articles. For games, I also use a site called hockeystats.ca, which tracks real-time shot share in a graphical manner and also in the traditional numerical manner. And I usually tend to post those during the first and second intermissions and just giving my little thoughts about how the periods go since I'm in the press box. And that tends to get some good interaction on Twitter from people because they like seeing, the Lightning played poor this period, but they're somehow still leading in shot share, so they must just not be doing A, B, or C right, or they're getting dominated, and this accordingly matches that.
Yeah, those are great. HockeyViz and hockeystats.ca. Those are two new ones to me, so I'll have to definitely check those out. I brought them up while you were saying them. They look good so far. HockeyViz, I think maybe in looking at your Twitter, I've seen some of the graphs come out or from somewhere, but that certainly would be helpful. Next thing up is March 20th. I believe the Oilers are in Tampa Bay. Is it the Amalie Arena? Is that what it's called?
Yep, pronounced Amalie.
Amalie, yeah, the Amalie Arena. And if we've got Oilers fans that are going out, or March 18th, sorry, it's a Sunday. It's a 5 p.m. game in Tampa. Oiler fans that are coming out there, what kind of advice would you give them? Places to go, maybe pregame, good sections to seats, anything like that. What would you say to Oilers fans going out to Tampa for that game?
It probably sounds cliche, but there's not a bad seat anywhere in Amalie Arena. Before I got press credentials, I used to sit in the lower bowl 100s, and they're great. I've sat in the threes, I've sat in the twos. I mean, the press box is in the threes, but before I got up there, I was sitting in the threes occasionally. There's not a bad view. You will not have a bad sightline anywhere you're at. The staff at Amalie Arena is wonderfully nice. They'll take care of you. You can't beat the price either. I mean, I think lower bowl costs like $100 something. And upper bowl is like below that. So for bang for your buck, the Lightning are probably the best show in town throughout the entire NHL when it comes to bang for buck. When it comes to out in town, right across from the arena is this place called Ferg's, which is a restaurant bar. If you like big crowds, by all means go. I don't go there because it gets way too crowded, way too fast. The bars I tend to frequent are Hat Tricks. There's also a sail bar near the waterfront. There is also Fly Bar, which is a few blocks away from Amalie Arena. But if you really want to do much more of the nightlife and good food, go down to Ybor City, which is a few minutes down the road from downtown Tampa Bay. Because right now, downtown Tampa Bay is currently under construction under the Water Street project, which is spearheaded by the Lightning owner, Jeff Finnick, which is going to revamp all of downtown. The entire Channelside district is going to get redone, new streets, new buildings. It's going to be an actual proper downtown.
Oh, right on.
But until that's done, in the next 2 years, your best part is to go down to Ybor City, which is not a very far drive at all, and see what's down there. There's a lot of great nightlife down there.
Oh, fantastic! Well, that's great and some good advice. I've not been to a game out there. I've been to a number of arenas around the league, but certainly Tampa Bay is one I'd love to go to. Before we finish up today, obviously I'm going to ask you who you're picking for the Super Bowl. And then, I'd like to hear about Raw Charge and what you're doing out there. And if anybody wants to listen from our neck of the woods out here, or for that matter, if anybody from Tampa Bay listens to the podcast just because they know you're on, then, tell us a little bit about Raw Charge and what you're doing on the podcast. And I know you're writing some articles for What Raw Charge is affiliated with SB Nation, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I assume you're doing some articles there. Let me know let me know some of the details about them.
So for the Super Bowl, I really don't give a damn. I don't like the team. I literally don't care for Philadelphia, and I really don't care for New England. But if you're making me choose Philadelphia, because I'm tired of seeing New England win. I'm so damn tired. I have friends who I play hockey with who are Patriots fans. They're like, hey man, come on over, watch the game. I'm like, no, so I can listen to your insufferable face scream about Tom Brady for the 9,000th time this month. No, thank you. But I literally just don't care about the Super Bowl. I really don't. My team's out. No, I'm not the only fan of Tampa. The only team I like in Tampa Bay is the Lightning because I grew up watching hockey. I didn't watch football until I was much older. Oh yeah. And I was born down here, but I was raised in West Virginia for majority of my childhood and everything like that. And I moved back for like my last 2-3 years of high school. So I started watching football when I was in West Virginia, and the team I ended up following then was Green Bay. So I've been a Green Bay fan since I was like 9 years old. Yeah. But again, I just don't care. Like I might watch for the halftime show and the commercials because I don't mind Justin Timberlake, but the teams, can they both lose? Can they both lose? Because they're both insufferable. They're insufferable.
Well, I don't disagree with you.
Because on one hand, you'll have the Patriots fan be like, yeah, we're the greatest, yeah. And then you have the Philadelphia fans who are like, see, you can't hate us anymore. We finally won one. And it's just like, just stop. Just please stop. Please. Just stop already. But when it comes to Raw Charge, so Raw Charge is the biggest Lightning blog out there. We are affiliated with SB Nation. There are, probably 6, 7, 8 of us total on Raw Charge's staff. We're headed by Tanya, our editor, who's a wonderful person. She's basically our blog mom. We call her mom. And what I do specifically at Raw Charge is I am the credentialed press member, since I'm the only one actually in Tampa Bay. A lot of other us are in Orlando, Sarasota, and the surrounding areas. Some of us are also in Chicago and other places. But I'm the only one who's actually in Tampa Bay proper. So I'm the actual credentialed media member for the site. So I go to all the home games. And I cover and I write recaps and stuff like that. I'm also a journalism student, so this also helps me immensely for that, since I actually want to go into sports journalism once I'm done with school. And I also occasionally do features on the website as well. I haven't done as many this year as I did last year, but I do plan to do a little more. And I tend personally to focus a little more on advanced metrics and also play-by-play breakdown. Yeah. On some of my recaps, I'll take screen caps and break down how certain plays happened based off what I know. I mean, majority of what I've learned in hockey has been from my father or from my own, or from my own personal experience. So I've always been much more a person who likes to talk to people, like to pick their brains about how they see the game and how they think certain things should be done and how they think this player should have done this and this player should have done this, because I don't know, I'm a nerd and I just like talking to people and picking their brains and seeing how they think of the game, because I don't think there's one specific way to play the game. I think there's many ways that you can play it. It's just a matter of execution. Yeah, which is why I just want to talk to as many people as I can, just so I can just get all these other opinions and then formulate my own off of that. But also, sorry, I forgot to answer your last part. And I also am the host of the blog's podcast, which is called Charged Up, a Raw Charge podcast. I publish an episode every 2 weeks. I'm actually about to edit one after I'm done talking to you. I'm about to edit my podcast that I recorded Friday today and put that out for tomorrow. So and the audience I have for that one isn't huge. It's only, it only gets about 250 listens a episode, which is much better than I expected to begin with, to be honest, especially coming from me, who was a nobody, and I still essentially am a nobody. Yeah. But yeah, I seem to have found a solid audience who enjoys my content, and I can't be ever more grateful to them. And hopefully they'll tune in to this podcast once you publish it, because I'll definitely be retweeting it. And hopefully some of your listeners will hop over and see how they like my content, and hopefully we can, just swap some, people who follow us and see what happens.
Absolutely, yeah. I always make a point. What I'm doing now is I'm, trying to get through the whole league and find a podcast from every NHL city. So I've done Section 328 from Carolina, from Raleigh. And Mike there was absolutely amazing. He, they started out just doing it for fun, and they've got quite the following and a lot of fun. And then I came by AJ Hafley, who actually is from Texas and is now in Colorado, and he's also a credentialed press member on the Avalanche, and they've got their. I think he's actually part or founder of BSN, and I think they're doing quite well. They're a subscription service, and he was a great resource and very knowledgeable hockey guy. But sounds a lot like you, like he grew up just kind of wanting to be a press reporter, and then of course I found you guys and listened to a couple of the podcasts and really liked it. And to anybody that's listening here, and I get roughly about the same amount of listeners as you so far. I've been averaging just about 300 per episode, which I think is pretty good after 10 episodes. I hope that they take a listen and go. And so you call it, sorry, it's not the Raw Charge podcast. It's called Charged Up. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
The official name is Charged Up, a Raw Charge podcast. It's on SoundCloud. It's on iTunes, Google Plus, and Stitcher.
Excellent. So make sure everybody subscribes. And you know what? That's really all I had for today. Thanks for joining pregame. If you had a prediction for tomorrow night's game, what do you figure?
Man, I hate these because hockey is not like other sports like football where you can kind of get it down. Yeah. Hockey's very much how are they feeling today? But if we're going to go on the causality of not causality, if we're going to go on the idea of both teams are playing the way they have majority of the season, I'm going to say probably like a 3-1 victory for the Lightning. But it would not surprise me if the Lightning just don't play that well and Edmonton just stomps on, because we have seen games this season when Edmonton has stomped people when everything clicks for them and they just stomp people. So I'm always afraid when we go up against like the Crosbys, the Matthews, the Eichels, the McDavids, that we're going to be that team that's going to get embarrassed because everything just clicked for them that game. I'm always afraid of that.
Hey, they beat the Knights 7-2. Yeah. I mean, who would have thought?
Beat the Knights, and we lost the Knights twice.
Yeah. So, it's, it does speak. I hate when people talk about it, but it does speak to the parity of the league, and certainly a team like Edmonton has got to be scary for anybody, because who knows what night they're going to come out all full force.
No matter what, you have Connor McDavid. You are scary every night just because you have Connor McDavid. Like, I expect the guy to come out and score 2-3 goals a game because he's Connor McDavid. Like, you have no idea how much he terrifies me.
Yeah, and as fans of the game, right? He's just fun to watch, and hopefully for your team, it's not as fun for the Oilers fans. Although I do hope that he has one of his career games tomorrow night. Anyway, thanks for coming on the show, and it should be up in a couple hours. So hopefully we get some listeners, and people appreciate the insight you brought about the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know I did. And I've learned a little bit about the team, and really happy to have you on. And hopefully, maybe around March 18th when we play again, we can chat again. Do it again.
Oh, definitely, definitely. If the schedule lines up for the podcast, I'll definitely bring you on mine, and we can just banter some more.
That'd be great. All right, thanks, and enjoy your day.
Yep, you too.
Oilers Live.